and I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you everyone for having me. They are recording this, so I'm going to stay right here so I don't mess up the recording. I am Mindy Crouch. I am with Pando Geriatric Counseling, where we provide mental health counseling in senior living communities. I'm also the author of the children's book, Understanding Dementia and Understanding Grief. All my letters. I am a licensed independent clinical social worker out of the state of Nebraska, a licensed independent social worker out of the state of Iowa, certified grief recovery counselor, certified dementia provider, and a certified geriatric independent provider. So there we go. Do you need to know that? No. So a little bit about me. I had 3 out of the 4 grandparents live with my family at different times. 2 of those did have a dementia of some sort. One had heart disease and the other one had cancer. So it got me to be able to see what it was like for my grandparents to go through the disease, for them to be able to take care of their loved one, and for my parents to be in the sandwich generation. So that's a little bit about myself. Few disclaimers. I do get excited about talking about these subjects, so if I talk too fast, let me know. I love roundtable discussion. Feel free to interrupt me with questions at any time. We'll have questions at the end, but you may forget about it. So put your hand up and let's talk about it, okay? I am not negative about the aging process. I'm really not. But I'm a mental health therapist and a social worker. No one calls me because things are going well, right? You guys probably aren't here because things are going well. So my examples will be negative, but that doesn't mean I'm negative about the aging process. I'll try to use myself for examples where possible, just for, maintain HIPAA and stuff like that. And yeah, nothing that I say is meant to be offensive in any way whatsoever, but if it does stir up something within you, usually that means it's a good thing, because we need to explore that more. So if you have questions afterwards, feel free to let me know. So today we are here to discuss dementia. What is it? We're actually going to go over the 3 Ds. What are the 3 Ds? Dementia, delirium, and depression. And why are we going to do that? Is because they look a lot like each other and they're very confused for each other. And so we are going to break them down a little bit. Not enough for us to be able to diagnose ourselves, but enough that maybe we can go and explore kind of what's going on a little bit more without just assuming that everything is dementia, because not everything that looks like dementia is dementia. And we want to differentiate that. It's very guilt-ridden, okay? Usually we think we've done something wrong, or we feel guilty being caregivers, so we want to open up that communication so we can get rid of that guilt. And then we want to be able to know how better to act or react. If we can be preventative or proactive in our actions, that's where we want to be. If we must be reactive, we want to make sure we can do it in a more positive and less resistant way. So let's start with what is normal aging. Sorry to tell you, but after 40, things kind of start going downhill, right? Our metabolisms change. Believe it or not, our brain starts to shrink. Synapses and neurons don't fire quite as quickly. 'Tis life, right? Doesn't mean we still can't have a good time. But not everyone will get dementia. According to the World Health Organization, only 5 to 8% of the population will actually get dementia. Starting at the age of 65, you have a 2% chance of getting it. It doubles every 5 years. So by the time you turn 85, 90 years old, you have a 33% chance of getting dementia. Yes, that is 1 in 3. Sounds better if you say 33%, okay? So you have a 33% chance of getting dementia. But a lot of times we often think like, I'm gonna get it, because like myself, I work in the nursing communities. So therefore, that's the population I'm seeing all the time. I'm surrounded by disease, death, and dying. So therefore, my focus, I think everyone's going to try to get it. So it's nice to be reminded that you only have a 5 to 8% chance of actually getting dementia. Normal aging. It is perfectly normal that overall, as we age, we do get some slowness in our thinking. We may have difficulties sustaining attention, difficulties in multitasking. Sometimes we're word searching. So think of it like this. So I'm a mom, I run a business, my kids are busy in sports, right? I can do lots of multitasking all the time. But the minute we go on vacation, can I multitask one thing? No, not at all. And so, because it's like, I'm tired, I'm busy, and I don't have to. And so as we age, when we retire, we're not as busy, right? We're not forced to have to get up and go to work or multitask. And so therefore you're like, I can't do it anymore. I'm not multitasking like I used to. But is it because you have to? Or it's just because we're not as busy? Okay? Or you can still multitask, but maybe we're only multitasking 3 things instead of 10 things. Okay? So that is what we call normal aging. And it is absolutely okay to have some memory problems on occasion. I've literally lost my cell phone in my back pocket for 10 minutes. And, right? Or how many of you guys have lost your glasses on the top of your head? And I have also lost my keys on my finger. I hooked them on my finger, loaded everything up, could not find my keys, right? At my age, we're like, oh my gosh, you're so silly. But as we age, what do we think? I'm losing my mind, right? It's perfectly normal. It does not matter what age you are. We all have those moments, okay? But we do have what's called mild cognitive impairment. And a lot of times this is what's going to happen after you have a stroke, where it's like you don't have dementia, but we have a little bit more than that normal aging. So you can still fully function on your own, but you may have to start writing lists because you can't remember like you used to, but you can go back to your list and still get things accomplished. The mild cognitive impairment, now it's kind of called mild neurocognitive impairment, usually happens because of a medical ailment, whether it's medications or you have a stroke, and those can be reversible, okay? So most of us are in the normal aging, and it is perfectly okay to forget some things. Some people may have mild cognitive impairment, which is just a touch more than the normal, so you know something is off. But when we get into dementia, there is no real reason we get dementia. We don't really know yet, okay? We don't have a specific cause. We do have a bunch of probabilities and correlations, but that does not necessarily mean causation. And so we don't know why we may get dementia, but you have to think of dementia as an umbrella statement. So if we think of cancer, we have the big word cancer up above. Underneath of it, we have breast cancer, lung cancer, pancreatic cancer. We have a bunch of different types of cancer, right? Dementia is the exact same thing. We have the generic term of dementia, and underneath it, we have Alzheimer's, Lewy bodies, vascular, mixed, whatever it may be. So if you say the word dementia, that is the generic term for memory loss. Okay? It is not the exact specific kind. There's over 100 different types of dementia, so it's pretty hard to keep track of what's happening, and it is a chronic illness. It is something that is slow and happens over time. It's not something that is going to be a significant change in a short amount of time. It is a chronic disease, okay? It's nothing that you did wrong. It's nothing that we can prevent. It's a chronic disease that happens over time. So the best way for me to describe dementia to you is, let's think of a hurricane with a couple sticky notes. When you start, and as a baby, and you form a memory, it gets written on a sticky note. You put that sticky note on your brain, and over time, there's going to be super glue that puts that sticky note on your brain, so it stays on there pretty good. Our lunch that we just had, church service today, what you did yesterday, got all written on a sticky note and is on your brain, but there hasn't been enough time for super glue to get on there. Then we have the chronic disease happen, which is dementia, that starts a hurricane in your brain. Starts off slow and it's a little windy and you don't really notice it. When you start to notice someone having major problems, it's pretty windy in your brain. And which sticky notes are going to stay stuck to your brains? The one that have the super glue or the ones that don't have the super glue? Right, the ones that don't have the super glue. And so that's why we can't remember what happened 5 minutes ago or happened yesterday. On the outside, we look perfectly normal, but on the inside, there is a hurricane happening inside. And it's blowing away those sticky notes. That is the best way for me to describe dementia to you. The other way I've also been told really helps some people is think of dementia as a puppeteer and your loved one is the puppet, okay? And that's why we have those bizarre behaviors, is because they cannot control themselves anymore because something on the inside is controlling them. So what are some dementia symptoms? In general, sorry, very short or a small wording there, it is memory loss. Okay, all of the dementias have the generic form of memory loss, whether that's person, place, time, purpose, some sort of personality change probably, and problems with emotional regulation. So when we have memory loss over a long period of time, we're talking like 1 to 3 years typically before you actually start saying like, hey, we have a problem here, noticing that it's not more than that normal aging. One good way to notice it is if we have circular conversations. Okay, you and I right now are having a linear conversation. What we talked about today, we could go and talk about tomorrow, and it's going to build and move forward. Person that has dementia is going to have a circular conversation. Okay, they look like they know what they're talking about. That first 5 minutes, it was great, but you walk away and you come back and we talk about the exact same thing. It's repetitive. It's moving in circles. Misplacing or losing things. Now again, we're not talking about the keys on my fingers, the glasses on my head, or the phone in my back pocket, right? We're talking about putting like your keys in the freezer. Or people call it squirreling away, you know, putting all of the mail into this hidden drawer that no one can find, putting all the TV remotes into some hidden spot. So you're putting stuff in very bizarre places. It's amazing how many TV remotes can end up in the dishwasher, okay? So this is something where you're like, this is not normal, and that would be a good indicator that something is wrong. Forgetting the recent events, right? Because we've got the hurricane going on. This one was really hard for caregivers, is they can't learn anymore. On the outside, they look like they know better. They used to know better. But you have to remember that hurricane going on inside their brain that does not allow them to learn new activities anymore. They may seem perfectly fine within their house or within their community because they're running off of muscle memory. But the minute you rearrange the furniture or you take them outside of that comfort zone and they're acting a little bit more confused, it's because they're not running off of muscle memory. That's their actual baseline. And so they cannot learn. This is where caregivers get frustrated because you used to know better. Why can't you do this anymore, right? Because the puppet says they can't do it anymore. Word searching. You'll find people actually start using a lot of synonyms, working around that word to try to get to the point that they want to get made. They just can't find the words that they're actually looking for. This is where we start having trouble with finances, not paying the bills correctly, easily scammed, when it comes to financial scamming. Poor judgment and insight. I had one client who blew a tire driving home from the nursing home. He was visiting his wife. Just kept on driving on the rim, and no joke, like there is scorch marks in the street, poor judgment to stop, pull over and stop driving. This is where you get worried about them leaving the stove on, right? Or if they start to cook, poor judgment. And then you go backwards on the timeline. This is where it's like, I was your son, but now why do you think my grandson is me? They're going backwards on the timeline because those sticky notes are getting blown away. So 30 years ago, memory seems just like yesterday. And we'll get into how we want to be able to handle that here a little bit later. But they're going backwards on the timeline because, again, that hurricane says they can't do it. So the most common types of dementia that we have is Alzheimer's, which is about 60 to 80%. Alzheimer's is really known for the plaques or the tangles that are in the brain. And the most common type of hallmark when it comes to dementia is not knowing place or time. Okay? They can't figure out how to reorient themselves. They probably know who they are. They probably know who you are. If they're in their home, they understand what's going on. But they may not know month or time. So the tangles in the brain gets in the way. That's the Alzheimer's. Vascular is 20 to 40%, which is actually a stroke. That's the hallmark of vascular, and the main hallmark when it comes to that is depression when you have vascular dementia. I mean, think about it. When you have a stroke, how claustrophobic of an ailment is that one, right? Where you can no longer use your arm, or you can't talk the way you used to, or swallow, or get up. It is claustrophobic, and depression definitely goes with that one. Hard time with concentration and following steps is another hallmark of vascular dementia. Dementia of Lewy bodies is 5 to 10%, which is a protein deposit within the synapses of the brain called Lewy bodies. And it looks a lot like Parkinson's. So this one honestly gets confused with Parkinson's because you're going to get the tremors, the sleep, and hallucinations. All of these can have every single one of these symptoms, but these are just kind of the hallmark pinpoints as if we're going to point out different types of dementia. Then this one is very popular right now, Bruce Willis, and this type of dementia, the frontal temporal lobe, FTD, is getting a lot of attention because it affects the language, it affects the judgment, problem solving, and very difficult emotional regulation. Then, why not get ourselves more depressed? You can have mixed dementia that's more than one type. So why not, right? The most common type of mixed dementia there is Alzheimer's with vascular. Okay, having a stroke, high blood pressure, or the whatever. I'm not a doctor, I can't say it. But the aneurysms that you get, brain bleeds, falling. If you're on a blood thinner and you fall, that's a really big deal, right? And if you have Alzheimer's and it's affecting your visual, this is one of the things like you'll see in the nursing homes. Having patterned carpet is really bad for someone that has dementia because it doesn't look like patterned carpet to us. And so them stepping could be a lot different and can increase your falls. So then you can also have Alzheimer's with Lewy bodies, Alzheimer's with Parkinson's. There's Parkinson's dementia. There's alcohol-induced dementia. I mean, there's a million different types, but these are going to be your most common. Follow my notes here. Okay, so this is not my drawing. I take no credit for this. It's in the reference page afterwards, but I bring this up to show you guys kind of a little bit what the brain looks like. No test afterwards, and I'm using my notes because it never sticks. But in the frontal lobe, that is commonly known for memory, concentration, judgment, and to the side is the temporal lobe, which is auditory long-term memory. That is where your FTD is going to be sitting. That's where your frontal temporal lobe is going to be sitting, or frontal temporal dementia is going to be sitting. Then you have your brainstem, which is like your warning system. The cerebellum is all about movement. That's where your Parkinson's and your Lewy bodies is going to sit. You have your occipital lobe, which is dreams, and then your parietal lobe, that's where Alzheimer's sits. And I'm bringing this up, again, not for testing purposes, but for you to understand, like, it really just depends on where the dementia sits in the brain as to how it's going to affect that person. And that's why it's so all over the place when we're trying to treat someone, is because if you're a gentle person throughout life, you might be able to just maintain a gentle dementia that's easy to work with. If you're pretty ornery, you're probably going to be pretty ornery and hard to work with. But if it sets in a different part of the brain, and it changes your personality, or that's why it looks like this over here but not over here, whereas cancer, there's usually a pretty linear steps that we take to fix it. This is why it looks so different, because you could have a stroke anywhere in your brain, right? And so it's messy, and that's the only way to put it. Yeah, you guys are going to leave depressed, okay? Mm-hmm. But, like I said, not everything that looks like dementia is actually dementia. So this is why we're going to go over what is delirium. Have any of you guys ever taken a pain pill and felt loopy afterwards? That is delirium. Delirium is an acute medical problem. So dementia is a chronic disease. Delirium is an acute medical problem. If I am talking to you perfectly normal today, and tomorrow you see me and I'm slurring my words and I can't keep my eyes open, you better get me to the ER quickly, because that is not normal, right? It happens within a few hours to a few days. That person changes from their abnormal symptoms. The hallmark of delirium is confusion, disorientation, and hallucinations. What does that sound like? Dementia. But the difference is that this happened today, and I was perfectly lucid and coherent yesterday. Or I was fine this morning, but I'm not this afternoon. So that is going to be the big difference. And delirium is reversible. And that's why you have to get to the doctor immediately, because if you don't take care of that, it could be very deadly. Delirium is reversible, and so we have to pay attention to that. Does anyone know the number one cause of delirium? Medications. Yes. There is a new and exciting trend happening right now called polypharmacy, where we are recognizing that we are over-medicating people. And a lot of people's ailments are due to side effects of medications. And so if you change medications right away, or if you change medications and you're like, something feels off here, that is a sign of a side effect that could be a delirium. So think of it like this. I take a pain pill, I feel loopy, it doesn't feel right. What do? I stop taking it, right? But let's pretend I'm in a nursing community and they are scheduled to give me these pain pills all the time. Are they going to stop giving them to me? So therefore, I continue to act confused, emotional dysregulation, and could have hallucinations, right? Now, I'm not knocking the nurses. I'm not knocking doctors, anything like that. But they've lost control over who's giving medication. So pay attention to, as you're giving people medications or helping them out with it, if they're like, I don't feel good, this doesn't feel right, listen to that, okay? There's a reason. Second one, dehydration, okay? Really easy way to test if you're dehydrated. You take your hand and you pinch the top of it. If your skin snaps back down, you're hydrated. If it stays pinched, you're dehydrated. So here's my example about dehydration. My dad, he had heart problems in his late 50s. Ever since having a few stents put in, he's been dizzy. We cannot figure out why. We really feel it's one of those medications, but we just can't figure it out. Now he's 72 years old. All of a sudden started falling. Now, granted, he does have diabetes and neuropathy, but would have these moments of confusion. And so I told you my history, dementia runs in my family, right? People have been telling me my parents have dementia back and forth with each other since I've been in college. So my mom and my sister are calling me and they're like, I really feel Dad has dementia, I really feel. And I'm like, I don't, because he's fine one day. And the next day he's not. But this has been slowly happening over time, right? So it wasn't like this, it was an acute medical problem, but I'm just like, he's not showing the progression of decline. Like, it's not making sense. So they took him to the hospital after one fall, and sure enough, he was dehydrated. And that was the cause of his confusion, right? But everyone thought it was dementia. Next one. Infection. Have you guys seen a urinary tract infection in a person of older? Yeah, right? It is some of the most bizarre behaviors ever. Here's my example of that one. My neighbor's mom, late 60s, had terminal cancer. Okay? She still had a year and a half to live. It was slow progressing. They were doing a good job maintaining it. My neighbor saw her mom on a Friday. Saturday, Dad calls and says, hey, Mom can't stand up. She won't wake up. She's kind of slurring her words. And daughter's like, call an ambulance. They take her to the hospital. She dies Tuesday of a urinary tract infection that went all over her body. And this is why we have to quickly pay attention to those changes. Did they do anything wrong? No. They did everything that they could do. Mom was fine one day and not the next. She didn't tell them that she maybe didn't feel good. Maybe they thought it was cancer, who knows? But this is why you get to the doctor when you have those immediate changes. Another thing, low oxygen, heart attack, low sodium level. Who would have thought that one, right? But yeah, low sodium level, low electrolytes, low blood sugar. How many of you guys, when you have a headache, take some Tylenol and move on with your day? Right? How many of you guys actually stop to be like, maybe I need food? Maybe I need water. I haven't had caffeine today. Maybe I had too much caffeine. Maybe I'm tired, right? to actually figure out the cause of maybe why you have a headache. So let's go back to it. Dementia is a hurricane, right? It's blowing in our head. It's windy. Delirium, I popped a pain pill and I feel loopy. That's how we're going to keep them separate. Questions so far? All right. Well, let's move on to depression. Typically, when we have depression, there usually is a precipitating event that happens to cause that low and depressed mood. Best way to think of it is, here's your baseline. All of us do this all the time, right? Yep. Food. She's talking. She's almost done talking. We get to be, okay? Depressed mood is you go down and you stay, and you can't get back up. And you only have to have this for 2 weeks according to our diagnostic manual. And I want to point that out because if you go to a doctor to get a depressive pill, you're going to get diagnosed with the word major depressive disorder. That doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong. It's just the way that it is currently labeled for billing purposes. So you're going to get major depressive disorder, mild, moderate, severe, reoccurrence, one-time event, persistent, with psychotic episodes, without psychotic episodes. So it's going to be scaled, okay? But the best way to describe depression is this constriction. You're drowning. You know you can have to put one foot in front of the other, but you just can't make yourself do it. So it's a drowning. So dementia, we have wind. Delirium, we popped a pain pill. Depression is that low and down feeling. Now, not to be confused for regular sadness. If my dog dies, should I be sad?
Yes.
Okay, is that depression? No. If I lose my independence and have to start walking with a walker, do I have the right to feel sad?
Yes.
If I get diagnosed with dementia, do I have the right to feel sad? Okay, but it's this constriction. It's the inability to do other things that makes it depression. The PHQ-9, every doctor does it now, even when it comes to children. It's in the last 2 weeks, if you've been feeling down, hopeless, or depressed. That is a really good standard of measurement for people to kind of recognize if we do have depressive problems. So that's why I put that on there. So some of the depressive symptoms that you must have. Do you have a depressed mood for most of the day or nearly every day? Okay, so you can pop back up, but is it just generally low? Do you have a decrease in interest in activities? It doesn't mean throughout your time you can't change your interests. You absolutely can. But if you really had been crocheting and all of a sudden you've lost all interest in doing it, that could be a hallmark sign of depression. A significant weight loss or weight gain, we usually like to say in the last 2 weeks. Are you eating more or eating less? Slowdown of thoughts or physical movements. Okay, what does that sound like? Dementia, right? Where things aren't firing, we just can't function the way we were functioning. We feel tired, loss of energy, feeling worthless, and excessive or inappropriate guilt, lack of concentration, can't stay focused, and the reoccurring thoughts of death or suicide. Now, that has to be differentiated between ready to die or wanting to die, because it is perfectly okay and healthy and a good place to be to talk about death, to be okay to die, to say, okay, God, take me when you're ready, versus I'm going to kill myself, okay? So we want to keep the conversation open of peaceful death and being okay with it, while keeping an ear out of, are we going to speed up the process, okay? But let's confuse it even more. Boredom, okay? Boredom looks like depression. Depression looks like dementia. Because we tend to look down. I mean, what do these people look like right here? They look depressed, right? They look sad. And COVID was really good to help us identify boredom. Because as Americans, we identify as our profession, right? I'm Mindy, the social worker. I'm Mindy, the mental health therapist, and I'm not just Mindy. We have this strange competition of who can work more. It's really weird. You only worked 40 hours? Well, I worked 60 hours. And then the minute we retire, or when COVID hit and we had to stay home, we were all like, what do we do with ourselves? like la-di-da. And in the normal functioning world, we're always like, I'm so jealous of you. You get to stay home. Why are you so sad? You get to watch TV all day. Like, what do you have to complain about? But the minute we have to do that, we're forced to sit down and watch TV all day. We hate it, right? And so we look down, we shuffle our feet. We don't know date and time. But the thing is boredom's fixable, right? Would you rather be diagnosed with depression, or would you rather be diagnosed with boredom? Mm-hmm. Right. So, good example of depression. Let's go back a second. I had a client come to me. She had a few fender benders, was having a really hard time with memory. She just felt like she couldn't remember anything anymore. Was having problems with her finances, and actually went and got tested for dementia, because that sounds like dementia, right? It was depression. She did not have dementia at all. So she got referred to me because of depression. Because her family moved in with her, so she lost like space to be able to do her activities that she used to do. Because of her fender benders, the insurance company went too high, so she couldn't drive anymore. Perfectly capable of driving. She was able to have family come in and help with the finances, because just because you don't have capacity of one thing doesn't mean you're competent. Competent and capacity are two different things. Whole nother speech, I'm digressing, I know. But she's perfectly capable of going and doing shopping and her hobbies and interacting with other people, but just can't handle the finances. So how were we really able to distinguish between the dementia and the depression? Because if something spilled on the refrigerator, she would go and clean it up. If something had to be done, she would go and do it. Perfectly capable. But if there was no pressure to get anything done, she would just sit and sleep all day long. Okay? So she could get things done. But my example of boredom is my grandmother. Okay? She lived on a farm 35 miles outside of town, neighbor 2 miles away, and her conversations were circular. So what does that tell us about dementia, right? Grandma, every time I talk to you, we talk about the exact same thing. She's alert and oriented, perfectly capable of running the farmhouse, perfectly capable of going shopping and taking care of everything. But she's bored. She has no stimulation outside of her husband. And there's nothing else to talk about but the drama that happened last month, because there hasn't been any other drama, right? So let's differentiate the difference between those. And it's not the same as vacation brain, because when you guys go on vacation, do you care what day it is? It's the whole point of a vacation. When you go into a nursing community, let's use the community word, not the F word, facility, bad word. Do you guys want to live in a community, or do you want to live in a facility? Right? So, if you go into a nursing community, does it matter what day it is? No, because someone is cooking and cleaning for you, telling you what day and time to do things. So, dementia is not the same as vacation brain. You're allowed to have vacation brain. So, here is a good way to identify some of those things. We need to focus on a change in their normal, okay? Everyone is allowed the right of self-determination, meaning everyone has a right to make poor choices. And everyone is allowed the right to live by their own standards, socioeconomic or otherwise. My normal does not equal your normal. I learned that very quickly when I got married. My husband vacuums, I dust, and I kept telling him how to vacuum. And he was like, if you want me to vacuum, I vacuum my way, because at the end of the day, is the floor is vacuumed. And I was like, yep, they sure are, just not the way I would have done it. So there's many different ways to vacuum a floor, right? Many different ways to make a bed. So let's go off of their normal. My normal for attention. You got to think of my brain as a computer, and it's probably got 10 windows open, and I'm constantly flipping back and forth from one window to the next. So I don't do this with other people. Don't worry, I won't do it to you. But if I'm talking with family, especially my husband, I will be smiling and nodding at you and not listening to a single word you're saying, okay? That is my normal. Same thing with TV. I can watch a movie, I'm going to space out halfway through. And then my husband's like, don't you remember? I'm like, nope, not at all. Or if we go watch the sequel, he's like, you better go watch the first one to remember what happened. So, yeah, that's my normal. So what is their normal? So if I'm not following you, paying attention to your conversation, is that my normal? Do I need to be red alert, What is their normal? A person with dementia and delirium, you're going to lose attention. Especially delirium, you can't keep it. Depression, you can usually keep their attention. When it comes to orientation, do they know person, place, time, and purpose? The big hallmarks I want you to pay attention to is a person with delirium and dementia cannot reorient themselves. A person with depression can't. They know to go look at the calendar. They know to open their phone. They know to read a newspaper to figure out what day it is. Thought process. Am I having racing thoughts? Am I in left field when I should be in right field? Perception. Am I having hallucinations and delusions? Very hallmark for dementia and delirium is to have hallucinations. Hallucinations are seeing and hearing things that are not there. Delusions is the distortion of reality. Test later on that, guys. No. But usually in depression, we don't have those. You can in very psychotic and severe episodes, but typically with depression, we do not have hallucinations and delusions. Behaviors. Do we have any abnormal or bizarre behaviors? That can be across the board on all three. Especially when you have delirium and they go manic and they are all over the place and making a mess out of everything. Emotions. In depression, we typically are flat affect, looking down, what ifs, right? When it comes to delirium and dementia, we may have very dysregulated emotions where they're crying when they should be laughing, or they're laughing instead of should be crying, or they're angry in a happy situation. Very bizarre. And what is our sleeping pattern? Are we sleeping more than normal? Are we alert more than normal? So again, based upon what their normal is, not your normal, what you think should be normal, based upon theirs, these are the questions that you can be asking yourself. So, why do we want to go get tested? Because we just learned that a lot of things are reversible, right? And who wants the label of dementia if we don't have to have it? Do you guys know that hearing loss can be a correlation to dementia? Yeah, not a causation. No, we're not going to causation. I'm not a doctor. Correlation. Okay? So, you're like, Mindy, it's pretty easy to tell when people can't hear, right? No. People know how to fake it, and fake it well. But if they're smiling and nodding, and you're like, hey, this ham was fantastic, and they're like, yeah, the birds were pretty good, and you're like, okay, we're having bizarre behaviors, or this person obviously has dementia because they can't follow my conversation and it's bizarre. Maybe they just can't hear. And so we have to go get tested and actually figure out what is going on, because dementia is not an ER diagnosis. If you go into the emergency room or your primary doctor says, yeah, you probably have dementia, and diagnoses you with dementia NOS, not other specified, you better throw that red flag, because they're being like, all they just said is, you have cancer, have fun, good luck, okay? So, just like in children, we have pediatrics, we have geriatricians for geriatrics, because their body metabolizes things differently. If they have Parkinson's, which is a decrease of dopamine in their body, we don't want to give them a medication that decreases more dopamine, right? We want to be able to have doctors to be able to prescribe the right medications, to understand what is what between the difference. Because when we went and got my dad tested for dementia, they were like, he's dehydrated. And now he gets to eat all the salt he wants, and I am super jealous because that's my favorite food. Okay? But how nice was it? Because he now knows that he does not have dementia. So there is not a specific test that says, this is, you definitely have Alzheimer's. There is not. So if you go to a geriatrician, they're going to get a full medical background, full physical history. They're going to look at all of your medications. They'll bring in a pharmacist, neuropsychologist, look at all of those things and be able to be like, yes, no, change this, do this, whatever it may be, and get you on the correct medications if need be. So the other reason why we want to go get tested is dementia is a very severe diagnosis. right? There's no escaping this disease yet. Science is working on it. But what happens is people, family members with very good intentions, immediately try to activate power of attorney, start taking away rights, start taking away power, driving and control. And competency is a legal term. Only a judge can say if you're incompetent. Doctors vote on capacity. Like I said, you may not be able to pay your bills, but you are perfectly capable of driving to the grocery store. You're perfectly capable of still cooking. And we don't want to take away people's rights and freedom before it is absolutely necessary. And like I said, it's with families with very good intentions. But that was my dad's main concern. He was like, if I get diagnosed with dementia, you guys are going to take away my driver's license immediately before it's even time. So we don't want to get ahead of ourselves before we absolutely need to. So, worst case scenario, we do have dementia. We must talk about the grief process. For the person who actually has the disease, they have every right to be sad and depressed and anxious and worried because it's not a good diagnosis, right? But as the family and the caregivers, we have to recognize that you're going to have two grief stages. You're actually going to be grieving for your loved one while they're still alive because you're losing them process, step by step, while they're still alive. And then when that loved one dies, people get confused because they're like, I don't feel sad, and I feel relieved, and I feel really guilty, not recognizing that they've already grieved. Or you may grieve again because now it's the physical loss. But usually that physical loss grief isn't as intense as if it would have been like a car accident. Because with the chronic illnesses, there is a blessing in disguise, as it does give you time to actually process together. It does give you time for closure, or those last wishes, or to finalize plans together. Gets rid of some guilt because you know what their wishes were, you got to say those things that you didn't want to say. But it is a two grief process. The other thing is that grief is going to look different on everyone because it's based upon the relationship that you have with that person, place, or thing. So my dog is on hospice right now, and that grief is going to be stronger for me because I love the dog more than my husband does. Okay? Doesn't mean that my husband is not insecure, what's the word? Insensitive. Okay? It's just that his relationship with that dog is going to be different than mine. Brothers and sisters, relationship with your parents are going to be different. So grief is going to look different, and that's why you can never compare. So what can we do to help? The biggest thing is we need to create a fire escape plan with our loved ones at every age, okay? When you turn 19 in the state of Nebraska, you're a legal adult, your kids need to sign power of attorney papers immediately because if they go off to college, have an accident, even though you're the parent, you can't do anything for them unless there's legal documents, okay? So, what nursing home do you want to go to? What, at what stage, if you get this disease, where do we want to go? Pick 3 nursing homes, pick 3 assisted livings. What is your retirement plan? So, good example, I'm a social worker. Social workers don't do blood. We don't touch people. We don't do anything. No. Okay? And my husband is the exact same way. So we already know that we're going to be terrible caregivers for each other. So we already have that in place. And my mom had major back surgery 2 years ago. My mom's a great caregiver. My sister-in-law is a nurse, and my sister was in the medical field, but my mom comes to my house to stay afterwards, and she's like, okay, what are we going to do for showers? I'm like, we're calling someone. What if I need bandage changed? We're calling someone. Like, no, okay? Not that I don't care, I just know my boundaries. So have a fire escape plan ahead of time. It still is very painful when you have to put your loved one into an assisted living. But if you've already discussed it ahead of time that if I'm a wanderer or if I'm mean to you or if I'm now incontinent to put me in a community, it's less guilty for your loved one that has to do it. Okay? So any fire escape plan. And I call it fire escape because you hope you never have to use it type thing. Remember that they are not giving you a hard time. They are having a hard time. It is not their fault that they have this disease. Remember, it's windy inside their head. There's a puppet controlling them. They can't, if they were in their right mind, they wouldn't act like this, right? So you cannot take those actions personally, and it's your job to not jump on their emotional roller coaster. Okay? Sometimes you have to sit back and watch the show and see if you can get them off the roller coaster when they come by. Most behaviors and reactions, whether positive or negative, are trying to get control back in their lives. How many of you guys love to lose control over a situation? Yeah, they don't like to either. And just like children, where we expect them to be happy all the time, we scold them when they have a temper tantrum. We expect our older ones to be perfect and happy and a sweet little old lady or man all the time. And that's not reality either. Okay? And so they are trying very hard to maintain control, whatever it may be. And just like as a child, the only way they can communicate is with the temper tantrum. As we age and the disease progresses, they may only be able to react in a negative temper tantrum way. You will have challenging behaviors. If someone is ornery throughout their life, that is an innate, and they will continue to be ornery. Okay? We can't change lifelong behaviors. Some of them will go away, or they will be heightened with whatever disease it may be and where it lands in the brain. But you will have challenging behaviors and bad days. So we try to never, ever, ever power struggle at all. Okay? Because you're not going to win. And what's the point? For you to get in your car later and be like, yeah, showed them, right? We don't power struggle. We follow their hallucinations and their delusions as long as they are not hurting themselves or somebody else. Okay? Keep them busy. We actually use two bad words. We lie and we manipulate. So my grandma, who had Alzheimer's, and looking back on it, she got it at such a young age. She was in her 50s, lasted for 16 years. And it was like, looking back on it, like, was it thyroid? If she had a CPAP, would have this happened? Now that we know what we know. But my grandpa is the one who died of heart disease, and they were super close, and so she'd always cry out, "Where's my Andy? Where's my Andy?" Which helps me preserve her dignity and grace better and not power struggle. If I say, well, Andy died, or if I say, Andy's out checking the cows because they lived on a ranch. Okay? It goes against our grain to lie, especially to our parents or our loved ones, but it's our job to preserve their dignity and grace now. It's our job to help them die with peace. And so opening up that wound and trying to reorient them, because again, they can't learn, is not fair to them or their emotions. Find alternative ways to do things. If they used to be able to cook but can't cook, have the ingredients ready to go. Have them stir. Pretend like you don't know how to cook and have them read the recipe to you. Playing dumb is one of your biggest assets that you have. Let's use it, okay? Because if you are teaching someone a new skill, don't you feel really good about yourself? Okay? Let them teach you whether you need to be taught or not. Okay? Give them a purpose in life. And it can be something super simple, like if they're a wanderer, making sure that they can wander safely, but we don't try to stop them wandering if it's not hurting themselves. But maybe set a flashlight with some batteries out. So every time they wander by, they keep putting the flashlights in or the batteries in, and you take them out. You can do it with clocks. Have a basket of socks or towels that constantly need to be folded, and every time they're folded, you dump them back out again. Unloading the dishwasher, okay? Any sort of purpose you can give them, let them have it. And validate their bad days, because they're allowed to have them. Absolutely, 100%. So, what are some of your resources you can use? The best resource you have is someone that has dementia, okay? Unfortunately, this isn't a disease where they come back and we're like, okay, this is how it really was. So we're speculating, we're assuming, we're generalizing, right? But don't make yourself an island if you don't need to be an island. Don't try to reinvent a wheel that's already been invented. Go talk to people. Get into some support groups. And if you're not a group person, get some one-on-one. Because you've done it when you parented. You talked to other parents and you took skills from them, right? And just like the minute you became a parent, everyone became an instant know-it-all and told you what to do. And you'd filter stuff out. Same thing, the minute you're a caregiver, everyone's going to be a know-it-all and tell you what to do and filter it out. But take those suggestions. Find something that works. And just like as children, it worked yesterday, but it's not going to work today. That's perfectly normal, but don't try to reinvent the wheel or make yourself an island and go through it alone, because there's people out there to help. Seek professional help, because at the end of the day, our goal is for you guys to remain as loved ones, not resentful caregivers. Okay? So anytime you can make us the bad guy, you do it. Or if you're becoming a resentful caregiver, that's when you move to an assisted living or whatever, so you can be family members again. Okay? We want you to help maintain that relationship. So we are perfectly happy being the bad guy. And medications, I'm not here to tell you prescribe medications, but I will tell you that there are sometimes medications really do help, whether you being the caregiver, to regulate those emotions, or your loved one, but understand it never changes the circumstances of the situation. Okay? It's supposed to help ease your emotions for you to better function. But when it comes to dementia, there is no medication for negative behaviors. So for example, myself, I'm a social worker. We have boundaries. We don't like to be touched. We like to keep our distance from people. Yes, you can come shake my hand, all the stuff, it'll be fine. Okay, because in my right brain, someone gives me a hug, I can be like, oh, okay, right? I don't like to be placated. I like to be, I'm pretty straightforward. I'm kind of a blunt person, so don't elder speak to me, which is baby talk. So let's pretend I have dementia, and you come up behind me, and you rub my shoulder, and you're like, hey, sweetie, how you doing? What's my reaction going to be? Right? Whose fault is it? You can't blame fault, but I'm saying that in that sense of no medication is going to change my personality, and you have to go into their world. Okay? If you know I startle easily, don't come up behind me. You know I don't like to be touched, don't touch me. Come around to the front. Talk to me like a normal person. Okay? There are some people who actually really do enjoy that. So it is important that you don't try to have them come to your world. You go to their world. Go off of their personality. Go off of their interactions. That's going to work best for them, so you don't trigger some of those negative behaviors, because it's our interactions that are going to be more helpful and more controlling than in a medication like that. Okay? We can't stop wandering. Everyone has the right to wander. We just got to find a way to make them wander safely. Put stuff out that they can tinker with that might stop them from wandering. Get rid of the exit signs. Okay? Because what does exit say? Right? Stop signs. Stop signs actually mean go. You know? We take our car, we stop, and then we go. So how can you change some of those signs that might make things look differently? What can you do to help lie and manipulate? Because again, we're trying to preserve their dignity and grace. So The Death of an Old Person is like the burning of a library by Alex Haley, and I just love it because we're hanging out with walking, talking, living history books. And we can soak up so much information from them if we take the time to remember who they are. Not who they were, who they are, because that stuff hasn't changed. So, questions, concerns, comments? Yeah.
My father had Alzheimer's, so I kind of went through some of it then, but then a friend started displaying some symptoms, I was so close to her that, I didn't really see stuff because she had kind of a different personality anyway. Well, when it came to the fact that her sister's telling me, there's really something going on here. And so I tried to seek help and, trying to figure out where to go and what to do was just kind of a maze. And, one thing I recall, and it kind of troubled me, was it took so long. When this process started, it took, I don't know, about 4 months or so before we could get a neuropsych eval. And, she went into crisis before we actually got that done. And by the time they did it, I mean, at least they could say, well, it's frontotemporal dementia. But in the city of Omaha now, you know, we went to Emmanuel because that's where I work and, you know, where I know some of the people and such, but, you know, how, it seemed like that process went on for a long time, which is frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is it any better now, I guess would be my first question.
No.
And, I mean, can you say seek professional help, for anything geriatric, you know, is, that a good place to start?
So the thing to remember is it doesn't matter, like there's no specific start here, because the way the helping profession should run is someone knows something who knows something who knows something. So we should be able to help lead you in the right direction. Unfortunately, the way the state of Nebraska is our only resources are in Lincoln and Omaha, and geriatric doctors are only in Omaha. Okay? So that is why the wait list is extremely long to get in, and it is unfortunately a very slow process. Legally, our hands are tied that we can't do anything because, again, we can't force you to do something you don't want to do. So it makes it very frustrating for the family members because they're like, why won't you help me? And I'm like, I can't force them to move to an assisted living. I can only make recommendations. Okay? But again, if we have the fire escape plan in place ahead of time, you know, or talking to your PCP to be like, this is what I see, this is my concerns, how can you help me, can you make recommendations? Physical therapy, occupational therapists, speech therapists are amazing. So I would say any resource you can start will help lead to other resources down the road, so at least you're not by yourself.
Mindy,
Yeah.
are there any geriatricians or in a place that you would recommend?
I mean, honestly, they're all pretty good here around town. I have no problems with any of them, so yeah. Yeah, she asked if there was any geriatricians I recommend. They're all good.
How many are there, roughly?
So Med Center actually has a whole geriatric unit, and they've got quite a few. Methodist has some, Emmanuel has some, and then there's some independent ones around. So not as
Oh,
many as,
more than a handful,
yes, more than a handful, not as many as we need, you know, but yeah.
But that's kind of what I wanted, is where to start.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So what did you tell your mother when she asked where your dad was, and you said the choices were that he was out with the cattle,
Or he's dead. So we always told her that he was out with the cows and he'll come back at supper time. But in the meantime, let's watch a movie, let's go for a walk, let me hold your hand, let's talk about, you know, my days. So my goal was to lie, to preserve her dignity, and then distract so we can move on to something else so she's not stuck.
Say you think you may have early part of dementia. Is there anything you can do yourself? I mean, apart from some major medical problem you have, that whether it's keeping busy, going to work, even though you may be retired, you say, oh, I'm gonna go out and keep myself busy for 10 hours a day, to hold off the disease, or maybe there's nothing you can do like that. I mean, there's something you can do as far as your lifestyle or something.
Yes. Yeah, there absolutely is. They call it the chair. I'm really hoping I remember all four. Movement, okay? It does not have to be rigorous activity every day, but it needs to be about 10 to 20 minutes of moderate movement a day. Healthy eating, sleep. Now, we're not talking about sleep every, like sleeping all day long. We really, especially with persons with dementia and sundowners, we have to limit our napping in the afternoon to only about 30 minutes because we don't want anyone to get into the REM cycle during the day. We want to keep solid REM cycles at night, okay? So keeping a routine, it doesn't have to be a rigid routine, but a routine. So like a Pavlov's dog, when the bell rings, you salivate. Our body knows when to sleep, and socialization. So it is, those are the four main things that help keep our brain and body actually going. It's also going to decrease our depression And when I say socialization, I don't mean we have to go to a bingo hall or we have to go to these massive balls. Even just going out for lunch, you know, or just those small interactions, going to the library, anything counts for socialization. So go based upon your personality. If you like the big things, do the big things. Otherwise, keep it small. But yet, your brain is a muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it at the same time. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, that was a very good question. So, and they, you know, and as for like people like myself, it's the same thing. Moderate exercise and eating right is all we have so far.
Is there any tests or data that would support a control group where one did, one didn't, say that, yeah, it made it prolonged the onset of the disease 5 years, or it did nothing? I don't know. Any data that would support
That,
what you were talking about?
right, and that I don't have anything right offhand. He's asking if there's any data to support what I have. What I just told you came out of the med center, so that's all I really know about that. But the science is very, working very hard on dementia, because dementia is our number 7 problem in the world. It's a very expensive disease. It cost us $321 billion last year, an average of $400,000 per person who have it, and 6 million people in America have dementia. So it's a very expensive, chronic, long-term disease, and they're very much trying to figure it out for sure. So it wouldn't surprise me if there aren't some studies out there.
Is dementia, is this something of our age now, or was this in existence 100 years ago?
Yeah, he's asking if it's new or if it's been around. It's always been around,
It's been
But-
long enough.
but exactly, our mortality rates are much higher now. We were at 78, we've dropped down to 76, but years of age. But usually we didn't have the medical capacity to live as long as we were living. We didn't have the pacemakers, the CPAP machines, all the stents and everything that allowed us to get to this moment. But then we also have to recognize that we're also getting into more of a community, in that sense of things are also getting diagnosed in the same way, okay? So it's not that we may have more autism nowadays, but we're now actually diagnosing it all together in the same way. Think about it, it wasn't until the 1960s that we actually did the deinstitutionalization process. Before the 1960s, if you were nervous, had any sort of psychotic episode, losing your memory, acting funny, you got put in a state hospital and never came out, right? So we don't really have the data of what we had, plus everybody was diagnosed differently. And now we're more community-based with the same, like I showed you with the PHQ-9, of how we're actually keeping everyone on a measurable scale. So you've got both of those things happening.
I found myself pondering, since short-term memory is part of what isn't as effective for people with dementia, or you don't have as much, but long-term memory is good, would reminiscing be a wonderful way for a person to spend time with your loved one? If that's more where their world is, or where they, I mean, I just love to, I love to hear the stories anyway, but I'm
Right.
thinking, it seems like a lot of people enjoy that as they look back on what life was like during the Depression, the world. I'm thinking of older
Mhm.
people, but is that a tool that would be helpful, do you think?
100%. You as a caregiver and family member just have to be okay hearing the same story if necessary. But what we're trying to get people to do is, this is the perfect opportunity to fill out those memory books, to write on the back of those pictures, right? To learn more about your loved ones. This is why we want to watch movies of their time, not our time. This is why we want to listen to their music, not our music, okay? Can you imagine the music that's going to happen when it's my turn to be 90? But yes, keep them in that time period and absolutely reminisce, and be okay hearing repetitive stories. You know, because, sorry, I'll get you. Because even though we've lost our memory, even though we may not know who you are, it's the same thing as a baby. They understand a smile, they understand a touch, and they understand a hug, and they understand your presence. Okay? those don't go away.
My husband had been diagnosed with mild to moderate dementia, and they always stress that he should do like, find the word or, little things like that. And, but he was given both Aricept, and then they added the Dementia. And it did seem to slow the progression some.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just did a training on those. Again, I'm not a doctor, so I don't do medications, but they're really finding out that doesn't necessarily slow the progression of the disease, but it helps slow the progression of loss of independence or quality of life. So,
And
yeah.
that's what we found.
Mm-hmm. But keynote with those, you have to get diagnosed in time in order to use them. And a lot of times people don't want to go get diagnosed until they know for sure that something is wrong, and then a lot of those medications aren't useful anymore.
Can you distinguish between Alzheimer's and dementia?
Yes, so Alzheimer's is a specific kind of dementia. Dementia is the generic term.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
Alzheimer's is like breast cancer, and cancer is like dementia, where it's just a generic. Mm-hmm.
That's really helpful, because I think, in my mind, a lot of times I would just think, well, dementia is kind of the start of things.
Oh, yeah.
And then, now it's progressing into something more serious after that, so that's helpful to better understand the classification.
Good, good.
So when people, have dementia and have the troubling behaviors, like I had to move my mother from a nursing home because she had behaviors and they said she can't stay here, so I was able to get a spot in memory care here in Omaha. But so she's, they've changed her medication. It's not a place where you see a doctor because it's in memory care. So it's sort of like, you kind of don't know, like, she's less of herself, but she's certainly not volatile, but she's, I guess, from the outside she appears happier. Is that a good thing for people? They're kind of less of themselves, but not volatile, with behaviors.
Right, and that's where I'm just gonna have to leave it individualized based, because where are we at on quality of life? Because if your mom remains volatile and is physically aggressive towards staff and she's got no place to live,
Right.
what do?
Mm-hmm.
And it is a lot of work to be angry.
Yeah.
Emotionally and physically, it's exhausting, okay? So, a quality of life, if she's a little bit more numbed out,
Yeah.
are we having, and that really only you can answer
Totally.
that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk a little bit about when, the reminiscing is really important, but maybe how common is it, or maybe what stage would it be when someone talks about memories and then adds things that did not happen?
So that's going to be based upon where they're at, where the dementia has settled in. It could also just be their colorful personality. You got some people who are really good storytellers, right? But it also, you just have to focus on it. It's not hurting anything.
Yeah, I struggle with that.
Exactly, because our family members should know better, and we were taught to never lie, and and it's frustrating on the outside. But again, because and I don't mean to demean them by talking about children. But how many 3-year-olds you're like, yeah, okay, good story, buddy, and we give them the grace, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing. It's my understanding that Alzheimer's, you eventually will die of it. I don't know, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But dementia, can you live to be just longer and die of other things other than dementia, just simple dementia? Is there?
So you actually will not die of dementia or Alzheimer's or anything of that sort. You actually will die of either your lungs filling up with fluid or heart failure or something else. Will actually be the specific cause of death. But it also is just because your brain has deteriorated enough that you can't do the functions that would keep the fluid out of your lungs. So aspiration pneumonia is a huge one of actually the actual cause of death. And to go back to your other question, sorry, I interrupted you. Alzheimer's, it can last 8 to 12 years. Lewy bodies tends to go a little bit quicker. Again, dementia is the generic term for all of it. But you also have to take into account the rest of your medical history. If you, so like my grandpa, he was an ornery person, and I loved him, and I'm super ornery, and you better plan to not admit me now, because I plan on raising a ruckus, right? Let's have some fun with this. That is my goal. And so that was my grandpa. And so when he could not drive, so he lived on a farm 35 miles out of town. My grandma is the one that had the boredom. She died of cancer before he did. He just stayed on the farm. We took all the knobs off of the stove so he couldn't cook. He was also the generation where he didn't cook. Grandma did all of the housework, right? But we let him drive in the pastures because we were all okay if, he killed himself. That doesn't sound right, but real. Delete that part. But it got to a point where he could no longer drive. Okay, and then he moved into town with us. What did he do? He got out the newspaper and bought a new pickup. Okay, so super ornery. But then he got to the point, and he actually cornered a CNA at the nursing home with a med cart because he thought she was a cow and was trying to get the cow back in the pen. My mom had to go up. I mean, this guy's awesome, right? And so, but he also had a severe aneurysm. Okay, and we got to the point where we're like, let's get rid of the medications that are keeping him alive. And so you have to take into account the other health diseases and ailments that are going on. And what do you do with that? And we have a beautiful thing now called palliative care. So you guys know about hospice. Hospice is when you have about 6 months left to live, and we give you comfort care measures to help you have quality life at the end. Palliative care is the step before that can help bring in some of those other interventions to provide some of that quality of life and help you make some of those decisions.
What if they're hearing stuff, like they hear voices or music?
Yeah.
And also if they're talking in their sleep, like they're in.
They're dreaming and talking in their sleep?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, probably too much information for you guys here. I will sit up and blink my eyes and have a full-blown conversation with you, and I am dead asleep, and you will not know at all that I'm asleep. And then the next morning they're like, don't you remember any of this? I'm like, nope, not at all. My grandpa, who we just talked about, chased cows in his dreams and no joke put holes in the walls because he sleptwalked so much. But again, there's nothing you can really do about that. I mean, there are some sleeping pills, but this is where you have to accommodate them. And unfortunately, if that means you have to sleep in a different room, if they're not hurting themselves or somebody else, we can't, fix all of those behaviors, unfortunately. Hearing and seeing things, those hallucinations, could be medication related, could be disease related, could be due to hearing loss and not hearing things correctly. Vision, you could have macular degeneration, therefore you're seeing shadows. They're saying sometimes with the sundowners, where we get more confused in the evening. One of the things you can do about that is keep a regular routine and schedule. This is one of the reasons why people with mental health disorders or dementia do better in nursing homes or assisted living, because they have a constant routine and a schedule to follow. So if we can keep them sleeping at night and not during the day, that will lessen some of the sundowners at night. Keeping the lights bright, because as they dim and your vision, we go back to the brain, is being impaired and we can't see correctly, we start seeing shadows, and therefore we think we're seeing people. So if we can keep the shadows away and keep the bright lights, that would help. So there is no specific answer to that, but there could be many reasons why they're seeing or hearing things. Changing light bulbs from yellow light to daylight is huge. Get rid of the yellow light. Yeah, she says she thinks they're too bright. I'm with you. So one of the tricks you can do if you have a hard time sleeping at night, again, get a routine. It doesn't mean at 8 p.m. I have to do this, okay? And everyone's allowed to sleep at their own time, okay? No, you do not have to sleep from 10 to 6. You sleep whenever you want, okay? I had one lady that was like, well, I really like to read at night and go to bed at like 2 or 3 and get up at 10. And I'm like, you do you, boo. Like, who cares, right? If you're still getting up and going to your doctor's appointments and eating and maintaining your house, sleep whenever you want. As long as we're getting that REM cycle in. But where was I going with this? Oh, yeah. So keep that routine of whatever you like. But a trick is when you're about a half an hour before you go to bed, turn off the overhead lights and turn on the lamps, because that causes eye strain, which will therefore make you tired. How we doing? We have one person look at their phone. I think we're ready to jet. Questions, concerns, comments? Yeah.
So I know this has been recorded, will we have access to your slides and all that?
Yeah, I can send the slides to Jody because you're the second person to ask for that. You guys are more than happy to get these slides. There's my reference page. I did not make up any of that stuff, so no plagiarism here. Okay?
Yeah, I'd like to have my kids see this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That'd be great.
Well, thank you guys for coming and for your attention. I appreciate it. So.